Rome didn't just punish criminals, it erased them. These were sentences so brutal, so carefully designed to destroy the body and the soul, that even history tried to forget them. Tonight, we uncover the 12 punishments the Roman Empire never wanted remembered. Before we descend further into what Rome called justice, I'd love to know where in the world you're watching this from. Drop your country in the comments because it genuinely amazes me that a punishment designed to terrorize ancient Romans still has the power to make us hold our breath centuries later. Rome, 1st century BC. The man being sewn into that sack had murdered his mother. The punishment waiting for him was called ponecole, the penalty of the sack, and it appears in the 12 tables. Rome's oldest codified law dating to 450 BC. Cicero himself described its logic with chilling precision. Let him be denied sky, sun, water, and earth. Let he who killed the one who gave him life be deprived of all those things from which life itself derives. Every element was symbolic. Every animal chosen for meaning. The dog represented shamelessness. The rooster, arrogance. The monkey, malice. The viper, the venomous hatred required to murder your own blood. When they hurled that sack into the Tiber River, they weren't just executing a criminal. They were erasing him from creation itself, denying him contact with every element that sustained life. His body would never be buried. His soul, Romans believed, would wander forever, belonging to neither the living nor the dead. But here's what your history teacher never told you, what the gladiator movies conveniently skip. The sack was just one method in a repertoire of 12 punishments so methodical, so psychologically devastating that Rome didn't just kill its enemies. It orchestrated their destruction as public theater, transforming human suffering into propaganda that kept an empire obedient for centuries. This is not a story about Roman greatness. This is about what that greatness cost, and the price was written in human flesh. The Tarpeian Rock stood 80 feet above the Roman Forum, a cliff on the southern face of the Capitoline Hill where senators debated and citizens gathered to hear proclamations. You could stand at the edge and see the entire heart of Roman civic life spread below, which made it the perfect place to throw traitors to their deaths. The rock was named for Tarpeia, a young woman from Rome's earliest days who allegedly opened the city gates to Sabine invaders in exchange for what they wore on their arms, meaning gold bracelets. Instead, the soldiers crushed her beneath their shields, teaching Rome its first lesson about betrayal. From that moment, the cliff bore her name and became the designated execution site for anyone who threatened the state. The procedure was brutally simple. The condemned would be led through the forum while citizens watched. No ceremony, no final words. They were simply hurled from the precipice, their bodies shattering on the rocks below in full view of Rome's political center. The historian Livy records that in 384 BC, Marcus Manlius Capitolinus, once celebrated as a hero who saved Rome from Gallic invasion, was thrown from the rock after being accused of aspiring to kingship. His crime wasn't ambition. It was threatening the republican values Rome held more sacred than any individual life. What made this punishment particularly devastating was its location. Traitors didn't die in some hidden dungeon. They were cast out from the very center of Roman society, their broken bodies left where morning shoppers and afternoon philosophers could see them. A reminder that connection to Rome could be severed as suddenly as a fall from a cliff. Archaeological evidence suggests the area below accumulated so many human remains over the centuries that it required periodic clearing. Emperor Claudius reportedly attended these executions personally, and Seneca noted with disgust that he took perverse interest in examining how the bodies had landed, which bones had broken first, which skulls had cracked open on impact. But the Tarpeian Rock was reserved for Roman citizens who betrayed their own. For slaves, foreigners, and rebels, Rome had perfected something that made a quick fall seem merciful by comparison. Crucifixion was so brutal that Roman law explicitly exempted citizens from it. This was a punishment for people Rome considered beneath human dignity. The condemned would first be stripped naked and scourged with whips embedded with bone fragments and metal, until their backs were unrecognizable masses of torn flesh. Then they were forced to carry the crossbeam, the patibulum, through the streets to the execution site, collapsing under its weight while crowds jeered and spat. At the site, executioners would drive iron nails through the wrists, not the palms, which couldn't support body weight, and through the feet. The cross was raised, and the condemned was left suspended between earth and sky, neither truly part of one nor released to the other. Death came slowly, usually from exhaustion and asphyxiation. To breathe, victims had to push upward against the nails in their feet, a movement that became increasingly impossible as hours stretched into days. Roman executioners had developed specialized techniques to prolong this agony, including a small wooden seat called a settle that prevented victims from suffocating too quickly. Seneca, who witnessed many crucifixions during his lifetime, wrote with barely concealed horror, "I see crosses there, not just of one kind, but made in many different ways. Some have their victims with head down to the ground, some impale their private parts. Others stretch out their arms." The most infamous mass crucifixion occurred in 71 BC after the slave rebellion led by Spartacus was crushed. General Marcus Licinius Crassus ordered approximately 6,000 captured rebels crucified along the Appian Way, the main road from Rome to Capua. For 120 miles, every traveler passed thousands of dying men, their suffering deliberately prolonged by skilled executioners who knew exactly how to keep them conscious and screaming. Plutarch recorded that the bodies remained on their crosses until they rotted away, some for months, a warning that persisted long after the victims had fallen silent. The message was unmistakable. This is what becomes of those who raise arms against Rome. While crucifixion punished external enemies, Rome had developed something equally terrifying for its own soldiers who failed in battle, a punishment that forced brothers to kill brothers. The word decimation comes from the Latin decimare, meaning to take a tenth. When a legion showed cowardice, mutinied, or suffered catastrophic defeat, they faced collective punishment designed to maximize psychological devastation. The process was methodical. Soldiers would be divided into groups of 10, often men who had trained together, fought together, eaten together for years. Each group would draw lots. The soldier who drew the shortest straw would be beaten to death by his 9 companions, not by executioners, by his own brothers in arms. They used clubs and stones, raining blows upon a man they had called friend until his skull cracked and his body stopped convulsing. One of the most documented cases occurred in 71 BC, the same year as Spartacus's defeat, when a legion engaged the rebels against orders and suffered a humiliating rout. Crassus revived this ancient punishment, which had fallen out of common use. 500 men died at the hands of their comrades that day, their screams echoing across the camp as a lesson to the remaining legions. The survivors faced additional humiliation, forced to camp outside the fortifications and subsist on barley instead of wheat, marking them as disgraced men unworthy of proper Roman rations. The military writer Frontinus noted that units which had been decimated often became Rome's fiercest fighters afterward, desperate to redeem themselves and eliminate the stigma. The poet Lucan captured the horror in his epic Pharsalia. Chance became the arbiter of doom, and on the hazard of the lot depended death. The psychological impact was so severe that some soldiers reportedly chose to end their own lives rather than participate in killing their comrades. Others formed blood pacts, pledging not to survive if one of their group drew the fatal lot. Desperate attempts to preserve their humanity within an inherently dehumanizing system. But decimation, terrible as it was, still offered 9 out of 10 soldier survival. For individual military failures, Rome had devised something with zero chance of escape. Fustuarium, the punishment of the clubs, awaited soldiers who abandoned their posts, lost their weapons, or showed individual cowardice in battle. The condemned soldier would be led before his assembled legion, every man he had served beside forced to witness. The tribune would lightly touch him with a cudgel, a ceremonial gesture that served as the signal. Then every soldier fell upon him with clubs and stones. The military writer Vestius noted that this punishment created such terror that facing the enemy in battle became less daunting than the certainty of death at the hands of one's own comrades. Polybius, writing in the 2nd century BC, described the aftermath. Even those who manage to escape are not saved thereby. They are not allowed to return to their homes, and none of their family would dare receive such a man. The public nature was crucial. It forced soldiers to participate in the killing, making them complicit and ensuring they would never consider desertion themselves. After delivering such brutality, how could you trust the men beside you? And yet, how could you survive without them? But military punishment, at least, followed logic of discipline and order. What Rome did for entertainment revealed something darker about human nature itself. Damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, transformed execution into spectacular theater. The Colosseum's underground network, the Hypogeum, contained 32 animal pens and 80 vertical shafts. Trapdoors allowed beasts and condemned prisoners to appear suddenly in the arena, creating theatrical entrances that heightened audience excitement. These executions were often staged as mythological reenactments. A criminal might be dressed as Orpheus and sent into the arena with a lyre, promised that his music might soothe the wild beasts. For a brief, hope-filled moment, the animals would seem calm. Then a bear would be released and maul him to death, creating a grotesque parody of the original myth, while the crowd roared approval. During Emperor Trajan's celebration of his Dacian victories in 107 AD, games lasted 123 days. 11,000 animals were killed alongside thousands of condemned criminals and prisoners of war. Lions were starved for days before being released. Bears were goaded with hot irons until they became mindless with rage. The uncertainty of whether the beast would strike fast or toy with its prey kept 50,000 spectators howling for more. Vendors sold wine and snacks. Children watched from their parents' shoulders. People placed bets on how long each victim would scream. This was lunch entertainment. Equally theatrical, but perhaps more terrifying, was vivicombustio, burning alive. This punishment carried religious significance, as Romans believed fire purified the pollution of certain crimes. Emperor Nero elevated burning executions to performance art during his persecution of Christians. Following the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD, his executioners would coat victims in wax or pitch to make them burn more slowly and brightly, extending their suffering while providing better illumination. Tacitus describes a scene with barely restrained horror. Mockery of every sort was added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as nightly illumination when daylight had expired. These human torches illuminated Nero's gardens while he drove his chariot among them, simultaneously playing the role of executioner, audience, and performer. The site of these burnings, Nero's gardens on Vatican Hill, ironically, later became the location of St. Peter's Basilica, transforming a place of Christian martyrdom into Christianity's most sacred ground. For crimes requiring spectacular destruction of the body, Rome employed death by elephant, trained to kill with agonizing precision. Pliny the Elder described their capabilities. They can be taught to walk ropes, to throw missiles, and even to kill on command, crushing a man limb by limb as directed by their handler. This controlled destruction allowed executions to be prolonged for maximum entertainment value. During the Punic Wars, captured Carthaginian generals faced death beneath the very war elephants they had once commanded against Rome. A poetic irony not lost on the cheering crowds, but for those Rome truly wanted to erase, physical death was insufficient. They needed to destroy something more fundamental: memory itself. Damnatio memoria, condemnation of memory. struck at what Romans feared more than death: oblivion. When the Senate decreed this punishment, it ordered the systematic erasure of the condemned from history. Statues would be destroyed or recarved with new faces. Names were chiseled from inscriptions. Wills were invalidated. Even mentioning the person's name could become illegal. The poet Horace captured Roman obsession with legacy when he wrote "Non omnis moriar," I shall not wholly die, expressing hope that his works would survive him. Damnatio Memoria sought to extinguish precisely this hope. Emperor Domitian suffered this fate after his assassination in 96 AD. The Senate ordered his statues destroyed or reworked, his name scratched from public monuments, his coins melted down. Roman officials worked with chilling precision to erase him from history, as if his 15-year reign had never existed. Names were chiseled from stone, inscriptions mutilated into silence. In the Roman Forum, the scars remain blank spaces where Domitian once stood. The paradox is unmistakable. We remember the erased precisely because the erasure was so complete that it became visible. Absence itself became evidence. From erased memory, we descend into a punishment that required no executioner at all. Immuratio, live burial, was reserved almost exclusively for Vestal virgins who violated their vows of chastity. The ritual was deliberate and symbolic, dressed in funeral garments. The condemned was carried in silence to the Campus Celeritis near the Colline Gate. There, she was lowered into a small underground chamber furnished with food, water, a lamp, and a bed. This was Rome's legal fiction. By providing sustenance, the state claimed it had not executed a consecrated priestess. The gods, technically, were not offended. Sealed inside, the Vestal was left to die alone by starvation, despair, or her own hand. The most famous victim was Chief Vestal Cornelia, condemned by Domitian in 91 AD. Pliny, the younger, recorded her final moments. When her dress caught on the ladder into the chamber, she recoiled from the executioner's helping hand, guarding her ritual purity even then. She called repeatedly to the gods, insisting, "Caesar thinks me unchaste I who performed sacred rites while he ruled and triumphed." Excavations near the Colline Gate have uncovered underground chambers consistent with these accounts. Some containing female remains, lamps, and food vessels, material echoes of Rome's most intimate terror. Equally horrifying was scaphism, a punishment Rome adopted from the Persians for crimes against cosmic order. The condemned was bound naked between two boats, force-fed milk and honey until illness set in, then coated with honey to attract insects. Left floating in stagnant water, they were eaten alive over days or weeks. Plutarch described a soldier named Mithridates, who survived 17 days as insects consumed him while he remained conscious. The threat alone could break resistance. When Emperor Aurelian captured Queen Zenobia of Palmyra in 270 AD, he threatened scaphism. The defiant ruler immediately surrendered, choosing exile over unspeakable death. Fire, too, became spectacle. Moore's per ignem lentum death by slow fire was carefully controlled to prolong agony. Victims were roasted in bronze chambers or lowered to ward flames. Jurist Ulpian called it summum supplicium, the ultimate punishment reserved for arsonists, poisoners, and magicians. These punishments were not justice, they were theater. Performances designed to teach fear, obedience, and inevitability. Crucifixions lining roads, bodies torn by beasts. Memories erased, priestesses buried, spies devoured. Each ritual told the same story. Power was eternal, resistance futile. Today, the Colosseum still stands. Tourists admire its arches, unaware that 50,000 once gathered there to watch people die. The stone is easy to praise. What's harder is remembering that cruelty once felt normal, entertaining, even necessary. Rome's punishments shaped how people thought, feared, and obeyed. And that belief that brutality equals order is the most terrifying legacy of all. Because it suggests that under the right conditions, we might sit in those same seats, watch suffering unfold, and call it civilization.